The silver moonlight cast shadows across the sacred clearing as Kira stood frozen in her white ceremonial dress, watching Marcus, her destined mate, turn his back on her and walk toward another woman. I, Marcus Blackwood, reject Kira Thorne as my mate. His voice carried across the silent pack members, each word a dagger through her chest. I choose Elena Ravencrest instead. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. The collective gasp from the assembled wolves seemed to echo through the ancient trees surrounding the ceremonial grounds. Kira's knees threatened to buckle as the mating bond she'd felt growing stronger over the past months suddenly snapped, leaving a hollow ache in her chest where warmth once lived. The intricate silver crown that marked her as the chosen mate felt like a mockery now, its weight pressing down on her skull. This cannot be. Elder Morrison stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. The moon goddess herself chose this pairing. Marcus, you cannot simply— I can and I have, Marcus interrupted, his steel-gray eyes never once meeting Kira's devastated gaze. Instead, he reached for Elena's perfectly manicured hand, the blonde beauty who had arrived from the neighboring Ravencrest pack only weeks ago. The Ravencrest alliance will strengthen our pack far more than— He paused, finally glancing at Kira with undisguised disdain. Then, damaged goods. Damaged goods. The words hit Kira like physical blows. She knew what he meant. The scar that ran from her left temple down to her jaw, a reminder of the rogue attack that had claimed her parents' lives when she was 16. The attack that had left her not only orphaned, but bearing visible proof of her inability to protect those she loved. Elena stepped closer to Marcus, her emerald dress catching the moonlight in a way that made her seem to glow. Marcus has made his choice, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to getting her way. Perhaps it's time the Thorn Girl accepted that some people are simply meant for greater things. The crowd of pack members shifted uncomfortably. Some averted their eyes, others whispered among themselves. Kira could smell their emotions, pity, embarrassment, relief that they weren't in her position. The metallic taste of humiliation filled her mouth as she stood there, abandoned and exposed before her entire community. Kira, Elder Morrison's voice was gentle. Perhaps you should— No. The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. Kira lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. If this is Marcus's choice, then so be it. I will not beg for what was never truly mine. But even as she spoke the words, her heart shattered further. The dreams she'd nurtured, of running through the forest at Marcus' side, of building a family together, of finally belonging somewhere completely, crumbled to ash. Marcus's jaw tightened at her composed response. Perhaps he'd expected tears, pleading, a scene that would justify his cruel abandonment. Instead, Kira began walking toward the edge of the clearing, each step measured and deliberate despite the trembling in her legs. "Where do you think you're going?" Elena's voice dripped with false concern. "Surely you're not leaving in the middle of the ceremony? How improper." Kira paused at the tree line, her back still to the gathering. "I believe my presence is no longer required here." She turned slightly, just enough for her voice to carry clearly. "I wish you both happiness in your union." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here, not in front of everyone. As she disappeared into the shadows of the ancient forest, she missed the way a pair of golden eyes watched her departure from the darkness beyond the ceremonial grounds. Eyes that belonged to someone who had witnessed the entire humiliating scene and felt an unexpected surge of protective fury course through his veins. Kira ran blindly through the underbrush, her ceremonial dress catching on thorns and branches. She didn't care. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony radiating from her chest, where the severed mating bond ached like a phantom limb. Tears finally came, hot and angry, streaming down her face as she stumbled through the moonlit forest. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away from the pitying stares, the whispered gossip that would follow her for months, the constant reminder of her inadequacy. The Thornpack lands stretched for miles, but nowhere felt safe anymore. Nowhere felt like home. The sound of rushing water reached her ears, and she found herself at the edge of Silver Creek, the natural boundary between Thorn and Shadowmere territories. The water sparkled in the moonlight, peaceful and constant, unlike everything else in her life that seemed determined to shift and change without warning. Kira sank down onto a fallen log at the water's edge, finally allowing herself to truly feel the magnitude of what had just happened. She was alone, truly, completely alone. Her parents were dead, she had no siblings, and now even the mate bond that should have guaranteed her a place in the pack hierarchy had been severed. "You know," a deep voice said from behind her, causing her to spin around in alarm. "I've seen some pathetic displays in my time, but that might have taken the prize." A man emerged from the shadows, and Kira's breath caught in her throat. She recognized him immediately. Damon Blackthorn, alpha of the Shadowmere Pack and Marcus's sworn enemy. The two packs had been feuding for generations over territory disputes and old grudges that ran deeper than anyone alive could remember. Damon was everything Marcus wasn't. Dark where Marcus was light, dangerous where Marcus was safe, wild where Marcus was controlled. His black hair fell across his forehead in waves that looked like he just shifted back from wolf form, and his golden eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. He was taller than Marcus, broader through the shoulders, with the kind of presence that made the air itself feel charged with electricity. "What are you doing here?" Kira demanded, scrambling to her feet despite the way her legs still shook. "This is Thorn territory." "Technically," Damon said, taking a step closer, "you're sitting right on the border. And I was hunting when I heard the commotion." His eyes traveled over her disheveled appearance, taking in the torn dress, the tangled hair, the tear stains on her cheeks. "Thought I'd investigate what could make an entire pack gasp like frightened rabbits." Heat flooded Kira's cheeks. Of course he'd heard. The supernatural hearing that came with being a shifter meant that her humiliation had likely carried for miles. "I don't need your pity." "Good," Damon replied, surprising her, "because I wasn't offering any. What I saw back there wasn't pitiable. It was insulting." "Insulting?" Kira's temper flared despite her exhaustion. "I'm sorry my public rejection offended your sensibilities." "Not your rejection," Damon clarified, moving closer still. "Their treatment of you. Marcus Blackwood is a fool, but I already knew that. What I didn't know was that the Thorn Pack had forgotten how to recognize true strength when they see it." Kira stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Strength? I was just abandoned at my own mating ceremony. I couldn't even keep my destined mate interested long enough to complete the bond." "Your mate?" Damon's laugh was harsh. That pampered prince couldn't handle a real woman if his life depended on it. He wants a pretty ornament to hang on his arm, not a partner who's actually lived through something that matters. His words hit her like a physical blow, but not in the way she expected. Instead of hurt, she felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. Here was someone, an enemy no less, who saw her scars not as damage but as proof of survival. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly. "I know more than you think," Damon replied, his voice dropping lower. "I know you lost your parents to rogues when you were barely old enough to shift. I know you've been caring for yourself ever since. I know you work 3 jobs to keep food on the table, while Marcus Blackwood has never wanted for anything in his privileged life." Kira's eyes widened. How could he possibly know all of that? "I also know," Damon continued, now close enough that she could smell his scent, pine and leather and something wild that made her wolf stir restlessly, "that you just walked away from that ceremony with more dignity than most alphas possess." "Why are you telling me this?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Damon studied her face for a long moment, his golden eyes seeming to see straight through to her soul. "Because someone should. And because," he paused, as if the words surprised him, "because I think Marcus Blackwood just made the biggest mistake of his pathetic life." The way he said it, with such conviction, made something flutter in Kira's chest. Not the warm, comfortable feeling she'd associated with Marcus, but something fiercer, more electric, something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. "I should go," she said, taking a step backward. "If someone sees us together—" "Let them see." Damon's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You're not their property, Kira Torn. You never were." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "My pack, your pack just stood by and watched while you were humiliated by a man who isn't fit to breathe the same air as you," Damon interrupted, his eyes flashing with anger. "Tell me, where exactly do your loyalties lie now?" It was a dangerous question, one that made her think of things she shouldn't, like how Damon had appeared at exactly the moment she needed someone to see her as more than damaged goods, like how his presence made her feel stronger instead of weaker, like how the enemy of her pack was showing her more respect than her own supposed mate ever had. "I need to think," Kira said finally, wrapping her arms around herself. "Then think," Damon agreed, "but think about this. You have a choice to make. You can go back to that pack of sheep and let them treat you like a charity case for the rest of your life. Or what?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Damon's smile was slow and predatory, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "Or you can come with me and discover what it feels like to be valued for exactly who you are." The offer hung in the air between them like a challenge. Kira's practical mind screamed warnings. He was the enemy. This was madness. She couldn't possibly trust him. But her heart, still raw from Marcus's rejection, whispered something different. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, this dangerous stranger saw something in her that her own pack had missed. "I can't," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "Can't or won't?" Damon asked, tilting his head. Before she could answer, the sound of voices calling her name drifted through the trees. A search party, probably sent by Elder Morrison to make sure she hadn't done anything drastic. The concern would be touching if it weren't coming several hours too late. "Kira!" Marcus's voice rose above the others, and she felt Damon tense beside her. "Interesting," Damon murmured. "The Golden Boy seems to have realized he's made an error in judgment." "Kira, please!" Marcus' voice was closer now. "I need to explain." Damon stepped closer to her, his presence both protective and possessive. "What's it going to be, little wolf? Back to being their kicked puppy, or forward into something that might actually be worth your time?" The voices were getting closer. In moments, they would break through the tree line and see her standing here with their sworn enemy. The scandal would be enormous, the consequences severe. But as Kira looked up at Damon's fierce golden eyes, she realized she didn't care. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her a choice that didn't involve diminishing herself to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be. "If I come with you," she said quietly, "what exactly are you offering?" "Protection," Damon said immediately. "Respect. A place where your strength is seen as an asset, not a liability." He paused, his eyes intensifying. "And the chance to discover what you're truly capable of when you're not constantly apologizing for taking up space." The voices were getting louder. Marcus would appear any moment, probably with Elena on his arm and a dozen pack members behind him. They would expect her to be grateful for their belated concern, to graciously accept whatever crumbs of affection they were willing to throw her way. Kira looked down at her torn wedding dress, at the silver crown that had slipped askew on her head, at the future that stretched before her, small, careful, and utterly ordinary. Then she looked back at Damon, at the promise of something dangerous and uncertain, but infinitely more alive than anything she'd ever known. "Kira!" Marcus burst through the trees just as she made her decision. Without breaking eye contact with Damon, she reached up and pulled the silver crown from her head, letting it fall to the ground with a soft chime. "I choose forward," she said. Damon's smile was triumphant as he extended his hand to her. Then, "Come." Marcus' strangled shout of "No!" echoed across the water as Kira took Damon's hand and let him lead her across the creek into Shadowmere territory, into enemy lands, into the unknown. But for the first time in hours, maybe years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The Shadowmere packhouse was nothing like what Kira had expected. Where the Thorn buildings were traditional and conservative, all clean lines and muted colors designed to project respectability, Damon's territory embraced its wild nature. The main house was built into the hillside itself, with rough stone walls and wide windows that seemed to invite the forest inside. "Welcome to Shadowmere," Damon said as they approached the entrance. Despite the late hour, several pack members were still awake, their eyes following Kira with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. She couldn't blame them. She was wearing the ceremonial dress of their enemy pack and arriving on their Alpha's arm without warning. Alpha, a woman with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes, approached them. "Should I prepare a guest room?" "Yes," Vera replied, "and make sure Kira has whatever she needs. She's had a difficult evening." Vera's gaze sharpened as she took in Kira's appearance more carefully. "The Thorn mating ceremony was tonight," she said, understanding dawning in her voice. "You're the one who was—" "Rejected," Kira finished, lifting her chin. She was tired of people dancing around the word like it might break her. Yes, Marcus chose another. "His loss," Vera said simply, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating an obvious truth. "Come, child, let's get you cleaned up and fed." As Vera led her toward a comfortable guest room, Kira caught sight of Damon watching her with an unreadable expression. There was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken, not just desire, though that was certainly there, but something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment back in Thorn territory, with a fireplace already crackling warmly and a window that looked out over the moonlit forest. Vera had left her alone with promises of food and clean clothes, but Kira found herself unable to settle. Everything felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "It's me," Damon's voice called through the door. Kira hesitated for a moment before opening it. He'd changed out of the dark clothes he'd worn to spy on the ceremony, now dressed in simple jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off the lean muscle of his arms. Somehow, the casual attire made him even more devastating. "I brought you something," he said, holding out a steaming mug. "Vera's special tea. It helps with transitions." The kindness in the gesture caught her off guard. She accepted the mug, inhaling the comforting scent of chamomile and something else she couldn't identify. "Thank you." "How are you feeling?" Damon asked, leaning against the doorframe but making no move to enter her space uninvited. "Confused," Kira admitted. "This whole day feels like something that happened to someone else. This morning I was preparing for my mating ceremony, and now—" She gestured helplessly at her surroundings. "Now you're free," Damon finished. "I know it doesn't feel like it yet, but Marcus did you a favor tonight." "Did he?" Kira sank into the chair by the window, suddenly exhausted. "Because it feels like my entire life just fell apart." "Maybe it needed to fall apart," Damon said gently. "Maybe you were trying so hard to fit into a life that was too small for you that you forgot what you actually wanted." Kira looked up at him sharply. "And what do you think I want?" "I think you want to matter," Damon said, his golden eyes steady on hers. "I think you want to be seen and valued and challenged. I think you want a life that's worthy of what you've survived." The words hit closer to home than she was comfortable with. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple," Damon replied. "That doesn't mean it's easy." They fell into a comfortable silence, the weight of the evening settling between them. Kira found herself studying his face in the firelight, noting the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair caught the golden glow, the strength in his hands as he gestured while talking. "Why did you help me tonight?" she asked suddenly. "Our packs are enemies. You had no reason to care what happened to me." Damon was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "Do you know how long I've been watching you?" Kira's breath caught. "What?" "3 years," Damon continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Ever since the day you stood up to those rogues who were threatening the children in town. You were outnumbered 4-1, still recovering from your injuries, and you didn't hesitate for a second." The memory came flooding back. She'd been working at the diner when screaming started outside. 3 rogue wolves had cornered a group of human children walking home from school. Without thinking, Kira had shifted and thrown herself between the rogues and the kids, buying enough time for adult shifters to arrive. "You were there?" she whispered. "I was tracking those same rogues," Damon explained. "I was about to intervene when you appeared like some kind of avenging angel. You fought like someone with everything to lose and nothing left to fear." His voice dropped lower. "It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Damon said. "It's acting in spite of it. You saved those children, Kira, and when it was over, when the town was celebrating their heroes, where were you?" She knew the answer. She'd been back at the diner, cleaning tables and pretending her ribs weren't screaming in pain from the fight. No one had thought to check on her, to make sure she was okay. Heroes were supposed to be self-sufficient, after all. "I've been watching you ever since," Damon continued. "Watching you work 3 jobs to support yourself while other wolves your age were training and socializing. Watching you care for the elderly pack members who had no family. Watching you give everything of yourself to a pack that barely acknowledged your existence." "Damon," Kira started, but he held up a hand. "I'm not finished," he said. "I watched you accept Marcus's proposal with a smile that didn't reach your eyes. I watched you try to convince yourself that settling for someone who couldn't see your worth was better than being alone. And tonight, I watched you walk away from your own humiliation with more grace than most alphas show in victory." The intensity in his voice made her chest tight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked why I helped you," Damon said simply. The truth is, I've been waiting 3 years for an excuse to bring you home where you belong. Home. The word echoed in her mind like a prayer. This isn't my home. Isn't it? Damon stepped closer, his presence filling the doorway. You've been here for 3 hours, and already you look more relaxed than I've ever seen you. Vera likes you, and Vera doesn't like anyone. The pack members who saw you arrive are already asking when you'll join us for breakfast. They're probably just curious about the enemy in their midst, Kira protested. Or maybe they recognize something Marcus was too blind to see, Damon countered. Maybe they see a strong, courageous woman who's been hiding her light under a bushel because she was told that's what good pack members do. Kira set down her mug with shaking hands. You don't understand. I'm not special. I'm just someone who got left behind. No, Damon's voice was firm. You're someone who was overlooked by people too stupid to recognize what they had. There's a difference. He moved fully into the room now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Kira, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to meet his. You have a choice to make, Damon said. You can go back to Thorn territory tomorrow morning, make peace with Marcus, accept whatever scraps of affection he's willing to offer, live the small, safe life everyone expects from you. Or, the word came out as barely a whisper, or you can stay here and discover what it feels like to be an equal partner instead of a consolation prize. His golden eyes seemed to glow in the firelight. Stay and let me show you how a real mate treats the woman he's chosen. Kira's heart stuttered. Mate? Did you think what you felt when I touched your hand tonight was normal? Damon asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Did you think the way your wolf responded to my presence was just gratitude? Now that he mentioned it, Kira realized her wolf had been restless ever since they'd crossed into Shadowmere territory. Not anxious or afraid, but excited, hopeful, like it recognized something her human mind was afraid to acknowledge. The moon goddess has a sense of irony, Damon continued. Marcus rejected his chosen mate, only to discover that you were never meant for him in the first place. That's impossible, Kira breathed. Mate bonds don't work that way. You can't just switch? No, Damon agreed. But you can discover that what you thought was a mate bond was actually just proximity and wishful thinking. True mate bonds. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently traced the scar along her jaw. True mate bonds feel like coming home. The moment his skin touched hers, electricity shot through Kira's entire body. Her wolf practically purred with satisfaction, recognizing what her human heart was afraid to believe. This wasn't the comfortable warmth she'd felt with Marcus. This was fire, wild and consuming, and utterly right. Damon, she whispered, her voice shaky. I know it's too much, he said, pulling his hand back. I know you need time to process everything that's happened. I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight. What are you asking? Stay, Damon said simply. For a week, a month, however long you need. Let me prove to you that you deserve more than settling. Let me show you what it feels like to be cherished instead of tolerated. The offer hung between them, heavy with possibility. Kira's practical mind cataloged all the reasons this was madness. She barely knew him. Their packs were enemies. She was rebounding from a devastating rejection. But her heart, her wolf, and some deeper instinct all clamored for her to say yes. What about Marcus? She asked. About the feud between our packs. Marcus made his choice tonight, Damon replied. As for the feud, his expression hardened slightly. My father started that fight over something that happened before either of us were born. I'm not interested in carrying grudges I didn't earn. It's not that simple. It could be, Damon said, if we wanted it to be. Kira stood up, pacing to the window where moonlight streamed across the forest floor. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably searching for her, ready to offer apologies and explanations. The smart thing would be to return to familiar territory, to work within the systems she knew. But when had playing it safe ever gotten her anything worth having? 1 week, she said, without turning around. I'll stay for 1 week, but I'm not making any promises about what happens after that. She heard Damon's sharp intake of breath, felt his relief like a physical presence. 1 week, he agreed. That's all I'm asking for. When she finally turned back to face him, his smile was radiant. Get some rest, Kira. Tomorrow, I want to show you what Shadowmere really has to offer. After he left, Kira sank back into her chair, her mind spinning. 1 week. 7 days to figure out if this wild, impossible thing between them was real or just her wounded heart grasping for the first kindness offered. 7 days to decide if she was brave enough to choose the unknown over the familiar. 7 days to discover who she really was when she stopped trying to be who everyone else wanted her to be. Outside her window, a wolf howled in the distance, wild and free and utterly unashamed of its nature. For the first time in years, Kira felt something stir in her chest that might have been hope. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming through Kira's windows and the scent of breakfast cooking somewhere in the house. She'd slept better than she had in months, which should have been impossible given the upheaval of the previous evening. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Kira, it's Vera. I've brought you some clothes." Kira opened the door to find the older woman holding an armload of garments. Unlike the conservative, modest clothing favored by Thornpack women, these were practical but feminine. Dark jeans that looked like they'd actually fit her curves, a soft green sweater that brought out her eyes, and boots sturdy enough for forest travel. "Thank you," Kira said, accepting the clothes gratefully. "How did he know my size?" Vera's smile widened. Alpha Damon is very observant when it comes to things that matter to him. Heat flooded Kira's cheeks. "We barely know each other." "Knowledge and knowing aren't always the same thing," Vera replied cryptically. "Breakfast is ready when you are. The Alpha is waiting in the main dining room." After Vera left, Kira changed quickly, surprised by how well the clothes fit. The jeans hugged her curves without being restrictive, and the sweater was soft enough to make her want to purr. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. This version of herself looked confident, strong, like someone who belonged. The dining room was buzzing with conversation when she entered, but the noise died down as pack members noticed her arrival. Unlike the uncomfortable attention she was used to receiving, their gazes felt curious rather than judgmental. Several people smiled and nodded in greeting. "Kira." Damon rose from his seat at the head of a long wooden table. "How did you sleep?" "Better than expected," she admitted, taking the chair he'd pulled out for her. The simple courtesy, something Marcus had never bothered with, sent warmth through her chest. "Vera's cooking will do that," said a man with graying temples and laugh lines around his eyes. "I'm James, by the way, beta of this motley crew." "Nice to meet you," Kira replied, surprised by the easy welcome in his voice. "We heard about last night," James continued, his expression growing serious. "That was a hell of a thing Marcus pulled, even for him." "James." Damon's voice carried a warning note. "What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." James turned back to Kira. "Point is, his loss is our gain. Anyone brave enough to walk away from their own mating ceremony with that much dignity is exactly the kind of person we want in Shadowmere." Other pack members around the table murmured agreement, and Kira felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. When was the last time anyone had praised her courage instead of warning her to be more careful? "So, what's the plan for today?" asked a young woman with spiky black hair. Are we giving Kira the full tour or easing her into our particular brand of chaos? Full tour, Damon said, his eyes meeting Kira's. If she's going to be here for a week, she should see everything Shadowmere has to offer. The emphasis on week didn't go unnoticed by the pack members, and Kira caught several meaningful glances exchanged around the table. Clearly, they knew more about Damon's feelings than she did. What kind of tour? Kira asked, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon from Vera. Territory run, Damon explained. 4 legs instead of 2. It's the best way to really understand the land. I haven't shifted in months, Kira admitted. Marcus had discouraged it, claiming it was undignified for an alpha's intended mate to run wild through the forest. She'd missed it more than she'd allowed herself to acknowledge. All the more reason to stretch those muscles, James said with a grin. Our territory has some of the best running trails this side of the mountains. After breakfast, Damon led her outside to a clearing behind the pack house. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the sense of pine and earth and the wild freedom of the forest. Kira breathed deeply, feeling her wolf stir with anticipation. "Whenever you're ready," Damon said, beginning to undress with the casual efficiency of someone completely comfortable with his body. "We'll take it slow to start." Kira turned away to give herself privacy as she stripped out of her borrowed clothes, folding them neatly and setting them aside. The moment her bare feet touched the forest floor, her wolf pushed closer to the surface, eager for release. The shift came easier than it had in months, bones and muscles flowing like water into their new configuration. When she opened her eyes, the world exploded into a symphony of scents and sounds she'd almost forgotten existed. Every leaf, every stone, every living creature for miles registered in her enhanced senses. A low whine of pleasure escaped her throat as she stretched, reveling in the strength and freedom of her wolf form. It wasn't until she heard an answering rumble that she remembered she wasn't alone. Damon's wolf was magnificent, larger than any she'd ever seen, with black fur that seemed to absorb the sunlight and golden eyes that glowed with intelligence and something deeper. Power radiated from him in waves, marking him unmistakably as an alpha. But when he approached her, his posture was careful and non-threatening. He bumped his shoulder against her gently, a question in the gesture. When she didn't pull away, he nuzzled her neck briefly before bounding toward the tree line, pausing to look back and ensure she was following. The run that followed was like nothing Kira had ever experienced. Where Marcus had favored careful, controlled jogs along established paths, Damon led her through wild terrain that demanded every ounce of her skill and agility. They leapt fallen logs, splashed through streams, and raced up hillsides that left her muscles burning in the best possible way. But it was more than just physical exercise. Running beside Damon felt like a conversation without words, a dance of movement and instinct that spoke to something primal in her soul. When she stumbled slightly on loose rocks, he was there immediately, steadying her with his presence. When she spotted a deer in the distance and felt the hunter's instinct rise, he rumbled his approval of her awareness. They ran for hours, covering what felt like the entire territory. Damon showed her hidden valleys and secret waterfalls, meadows where wildflowers grew in impossible profusion, and rocky overlooks that offered views for miles in every direction. It was beautiful beyond anything she'd imagined, wild and free and utterly alive. When they finally stopped at a grove of ancient oaks, both wolves breathing hard from their exertion, Kira felt more herself than she had in years. Her wolf was content and tired in the best possible way, every sense heightened and satisfied. Damon shifted back to human form first, his transformation as fluid and graceful as everything else about him. "What did you think?" he asked, pulling on his clothes. Kira shifted as well, surprised to find herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "That was incredible. Your territory is wild," Damon finished with satisfaction. We don't believe in taming the forest to suit our convenience. We adapt ourselves to it instead. It's beautiful, Kira said honestly. I can see why your pack is so devoted to protecting it. Can you? Damon studied her face carefully. Even knowing what it would mean to give up the safety of civilization? Kira considered the question as she dressed. Back in Thorn territory, everything was planned and controlled and predictable. Even their forest runs followed carefully maintained trails designed to minimize risk. But here, surrounded by true wilderness, she felt more alive than she had in years. I think, she said slowly, that safety is overrated if it means giving up everything that makes life worth living. Damon's smile was brilliant. Now you're beginning to understand what Shadowmere is really about. They walked back toward the pack house in comfortable silence, their wolves satisfied and tired from the run. But as they approached the main building, Kira noticed unusual activity. Several unfamiliar cars in the driveway, and pack members clustered in serious conversation. Alpha, James appeared at their side, his expression grim. We have visitors. Who? Damon's entire demeanor shifted, authority settling over him like a mantle. Marcus Blackwood, James replied. He's here with Elder Morrison and 2 of his enforcers. They're demanding to speak with you about Kira. Kira's stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she'd hoped for more time to figure out her own feelings before being forced to confront the mess she'd left behind. What do they want? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. To take you home, James said bluntly. Marcus is claiming that you were distraught and not thinking clearly when you left. He says the mate bond is still intact and you belong with the Thorn pack. The hell it is, Damon growled, his eyes flashing gold. He rejected her publicly. Any bond they might have had was severed the moment he chose another mate. That's what I told him, James agreed. But he's insisting it was a temporary lapse in judgment. He wants to make amends. Kira felt sick. Of course Marcus would show up now when she was finally beginning to feel like herself again. Of course he would try to drag her back just when she was discovering what it felt like to be valued. I have to face him, she said quietly. I can't hide behind you, Damon. Not if I want to have any say in my own future. Damon looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. Together then. He's not facing you alone. Damon, together, he repeated firmly. You're under my protection now. That means something. As they walked toward the pack house, Kira tried to prepare herself for whatever Marcus might say. But deep down, she knew that no amount of apologies or explanations would change the fundamental truth of what had happened. He'd chosen someone else when it mattered. Everything that came after was just damage control. The question was whether she was strong enough to make him understand that some choices couldn't be undone. Marcus was pacing in the main parlor when they entered, his golden hair disheveled and his usually perfect appearance showing signs of a sleepless night. Elder Morrison sat in one of the chairs, his weathered face grave with concern. 2 large men Kira recognized as pack enforcers flanked the door, their presence clearly intended to intimidate. Kira, Marcus' voice was filled with relief when he saw her. Thank the goddess you're safe. When you disappeared last night, I was terrified something had happened to you. I'm fine, Kira replied, staying close to Damon's side, as you can see. You look, Marcus's gaze traveled over her appearance, taking in the casual clothes, the color in her cheeks from their run, the way she stood with her shoulders back instead of hunched defensively. Different. I feel different, Kira said honestly. Kira, sweetheart, we need to talk, Marcus continued, his voice taking on the coaxing tone he'd always used when he wanted something from her. About last night, about what happened. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did, Kira agreed. You humiliated me in front of our entire pack. You rejected me for another woman. You called me damaged goods. Marcus flinched at the direct recounting of his actions. I was confused. Elena had been pushing for an alliance between our packs, and I thought— He ran his hands through his hair. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone, but I realize now that I was wrong. What you were doing, Damon said coldly, was thinking with your dick instead of your brain. And now that the shiny new toy has lost its appeal, you want your safe backup option back. This doesn't concern you, Blackthorn, Marcus snapped, his composure cracking. Kira is my mate. Our bond was severed the moment you rejected her, publicly and without reservation. You don't get to take that back just because you've realized what an idiot you are. That's where you're wrong. Elder Morrison spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of his years. The mate bond can be reinstated if both parties agree to it. Marcus is prepared to make amends for his error in judgment. Are you? Damon's voice was deceptively calm. And what form do these amends take? Marcus straightened, clearly thinking he was on surer ground now. I've broken things off with Elena, of course. The engagement was announced this morning, but I've made it clear that it was a mistake born of political pressure. And I'm prepared to offer Kira a formal apology before the entire pack. How generous, Damon said dryly. I'm also prepared to move forward with our original mating ceremony, Marcus continued, his confidence growing. We can be bonded by the next full moon. Everything can go back to the way it was supposed to be. The way it was supposed to be, Kira repeated slowly. You mean with me as your consolation prize, your backup plan when the woman you actually wanted turned out to be unavailable. It wasn't like that, Marcus protested. Elena was a political consideration, nothing more. You were always my first choice. No, Kira said firmly. I was your safe choice. There's a difference. Kira, please, Marcus' voice took on a desperate edge. I know I hurt you. I know I handled things badly. But we can work through this. We belong together. The moon goddess chose us for each other. Did she? Kira asked. Because standing here now, I'm starting to wonder if what I felt for you was ever really a mate bond or just familiarity, comfort, the path of least resistance. Marcus's face went pale. You don't mean that. I think I do, Kira said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. Marcus, when you look at me, what do you see? I see my mate, my future Luna, the woman I'm going to spend my life with. But do you see me? Kira pressed. Do you see Kira Thorne, the woman who's been working 3 jobs since she was 16? The woman who fights for things she believes in even when it's not convenient? The woman who has scars and opinions and dreams that might not match perfectly with yours? Marcus was silent for a long moment. I see the woman I fell in love with, he said finally. No, Kira shook her head. You see the woman you thought you could mold into what you needed. You see potential, not reality. And that's not love, Marcus. That's a project. That's not true. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? Kira interrupted. Not what I wanted for dinner or what dress to wear, but what I actually wanted out of life. What made me happy. What my dreams were. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly unable to come up with an answer. You can't answer, Kira continued, because my wants and dreams were never part of the equation. I was supposed to want whatever would make your life easier. Kira, Elder Morrison interjected gently, perhaps you're being too harsh. Marcus made a mistake, yes, but he's here to make amends. Surely that counts for something. It counts for something, Kira agreed. It counts as too little, too late. You're upset, Marcus said. his voice taking on the patronizing tone that had always made her teeth clench. "You're hurt, and you're not thinking clearly. But running away with our enemies isn't the answer." "I'm not running away," Kira replied. "I'm running towards something better." "Better?" Marcus' laugh was bitter. "You think Blackthorn is better than me? You think this pack of savages can offer you more than I can?" "They already have," Kira said simply. "They've offered me respect. They've offered me choices. They've offered me the chance to be myself instead of someone's idealized version of who I should be." "And what about duty?" Elder Morrison asked. "What about loyalty to your pack, your family?" "My family is dead," Kira said bluntly, "and my pack stood by and watched while I was humiliated without lifting a finger to defend me. So forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly loyal at the moment." "Kira!" Marcus started forward, but Damon stepped between them, his presence radiating controlled menace. "I think you've said enough," Damon said quietly. "You've made your offer, she's declined. Time to go." "This isn't over," Marcus said, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. "Kira, you're making a huge mistake. When this infatuation with danger wears off, you'll realize what you've thrown away." "Maybe," Kira said, "but at least it will be my mistake to make." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. What he saw there must not have matched his expectations, because his expression shifted from desperate to angry. "Fine," he said coldly. "Have your adventure. But when Blackthorn gets tired of his new toy and tosses you aside, don't come crawling back to me. I won't be waiting." The words were meant to hurt, to plant seeds of doubt about Damon's motives. But instead of pain, Kira felt only relief. This was who Marcus really was when he didn't get his way: petty, cruel, and determined to tear down what he couldn't control. "I wouldn't expect you to wait," she replied calmly. "I'm sure Elena will be available again soon enough." Marcus's face flushed red with rage, but before he could respond, Elder Morrison stood up. "We should go," the elder said quietly. "It's clear Kira has made her choice." "For now," one of the enforcers spoke, for the first time, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. "But choices can be reconsidered." Damon's growl was low and dangerous. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reminder," the enforcer replied, "about the consequences of choosing the wrong side in old conflicts." "The only conflict here," Damon said, his voice deadly calm, "is between a woman's right to choose her own path and some people's inability to accept that choice. And if anyone tries to force her into something she doesn't want, they'll answer to me personally." The promise in his voice was unmistakable, and even the enforcers shifted uneasily. Damon might be outnumbered in this room, but his reputation as a fighter was well known throughout both territories. "Come, Marcus," Elder Morrison said firmly, "we've done what we came to do." As they filed out of the room, Marcus paused at the doorway and looked back at Kira one more time. "I did love you," he said quietly, "in my own way." "I know," Kira replied, "but your way wasn't enough." After they left, the room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Kira sank into one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted by the emotional toll of the confrontation. "You okay?" Damon asked, settling into the chair beside her. "I think so," Kira said, though her hands were trembling slightly. "It's strange. I thought that would be harder." "Why?" "Because I thought I loved him," Kira admitted. "For years, I thought Marcus was my future, my destiny. And just now, watching him try to convince me to come back, I realized that what I felt for him was never really love at all." "What was it?" Kira considered the question carefully. "Habit, maybe, or hope. I wanted so badly to belong somewhere, to matter to someone, that I convinced myself his attention was the same thing as affection." She looked up at Damon, but it wasn't. Real affection doesn't come with conditions and expectations. It doesn't require you to minimize yourself to make room for someone else's ego. No, Damon agreed softly. It doesn't. He never asked me what I wanted, Kira continued, the realization still fresh and startling. In 3 years of courtship, he never once asked me what I dreamed about or what would make me happy. He just assumed I'd be grateful for whatever he was willing to give. And were you? Grateful, I mean? For a while, Kira said honestly. When you've been alone as long as I have, any attention feels like a gift. But gratitude isn't the same thing as love either. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the fire dance in the hearth. Outside, Kira could hear the normal sounds of pack life continuing. Children playing, adults working, the everyday rhythm of a community that functioned without drama or crisis. "What happens now?" she asked eventually. "Now," Damon said, "you have 6 more days to figure out what you really want. No pressure, no expectations, no one else's agenda to consider. Just you and whatever feels right. And if what feels right isn't what's practical." Damon's smile was soft and knowing. Since when has anything really worthwhile been practical? Kira found herself smiling back, feeling lighter than she had in years. For the first time in her adult life, she was exactly where she wanted to be, with someone who saw her as she really was and still chose to be there. It was terrifying and exhilarating and utterly right all at the same time. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a choice," Kira replied. "For letting me discover who I am when I'm not trying to be who someone else needs me to be." "Kira," Damon said, his voice rough with emotion, "you never have to thank me for that. Your choices are your own. They always have been." But as he said it, his golden eyes were warm with something that looked a lot like love. Not the possessive, conditional affection Marcus had offered, but something deeper and more generous. Something that felt like coming home. Over the next few days, Kira fell into a routine that felt more natural than anything she'd experienced in years. Mornings began with pack runs through the wilderness, her wolf growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. Afternoons were spent learning about Shadowmere's unique approach to pack governance, less hierarchical than Thorn, more focused on collective decision-making and individual strengths. "Every member contributes according to their abilities," Vera explained as they worked together in the communal gardens. "We don't believe in making people fit predetermined roles if their talents lie elsewhere." "What do you mean?" Kira asked, carefully transplanting seedlings into prepared soil. "Take Marcus, for instance," Vera said with a knowing look. "He was born to be alpha, so he learned to lead whether he was naturally suited for it or not. But you're a natural protector, a nurturer. In Shadowmere, we'd find ways to use those instincts that didn't require you to diminish other parts of yourself." It was a radical concept to someone raised in the rigid hierarchy of traditional pack structure. Kira found herself drawn to the idea of a community where strength came from diversity rather than conformity. "What did you do before you came here?" she asked Vera. "I was a nurse in the human world," Vera replied. "Spent 30 years in emergency rooms, patching up broken bodies and trying to heal broken spirits. When I met my mate and joined Shadowmere, I thought I'd have to give all that up." She smiled. "Instead, I became our pack healer. All those human medical skills translated perfectly to caring for injured wolves." "You didn't have to choose between your old life and your new one?" "The best parts of my old life became part of my new one," Vera said. "That's what happens when you find the right place. You don't have to leave pieces of yourself behind." It was a lesson Kira found herself thinking about often as she explored more of what Shadowmere had to offer. Unlike Thornpack, where activities were carefully segregated by gender and status, here she found herself welcome in any gathering that interested her. She sat in on strategic planning meetings where her insights about Thorn tactics were valued. She joined the afternoon training sessions where younger wolves practiced their combat skills, surprised to discover she had natural teaching instincts. But it was the evenings that she treasured most. After dinner, when the day's work was done, she and Damon would walk through the forest together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his vision for the pack, his hopes for bridging the old divisions that kept their communities isolated from each other. She found herself sharing dreams she'd never spoken aloud, her desire to open a sanctuary for orphan shifter children, her passion for preserving the old stories and traditions that were being lost in the modern world. "You could do that here," Damon said one evening as they sat by the stream where they'd first met. "The sanctuary, I mean. We have the space, and Goddess knows there are too many young ones who need safe places to heal and grow." "It's just a dream," Kira protested. "I don't have the resources or the training." "Resources can be found," Damon interrupted. "Training can be acquired. What you already have is the most important thing, the heart for it. How can you be so sure?" "Because I've watched you this week," Damon said simply. "I've seen how you interact with the pack children, how you listen when someone needs to talk, how you notice when someone's struggling and find ways to help without making them feel weak. You're a natural healer, Kira. Not the kind with medical training, but the kind who helps people remember they're worthy of love." The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they felt so fundamentally true. All her life, she'd been told her value lay in her ability to support others, to make herself useful. But Damon was suggesting something different, that her capacity for compassion wasn't just a service she provided, but a strength that could shape her life's work. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "Because no one ever bothered to help you see it," Damon replied. "They were too busy telling you what they needed from you to ask what you needed from yourself." It was becoming a pattern, this way he had of reframing her entire understanding of herself. Where Marcus had seen her scars as damage to be overlooked, Damon saw them as evidence of survival. Where Marcus had seen her independence as something to be managed, Damon saw it as strength to be celebrated. "Can I ask you something?" Kira said suddenly. "Anything." "That first night, when you said you'd been watching me for 3 years, was that just physical attraction or something more?" Damon was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Do you remember the memorial service for Mrs. Henderson?" he asked. Kira nodded. Mrs. Henderson had been an elderly pack member with no family, someone most people ignored until she died alone in her small apartment. "You were the only one who spoke at her service," Damon continued. "Everyone else was going through the motions, fulfilling their duty to a deceased pack member. But you talked about her garden, about how she always saved seeds from her best flowers to share with neighbors. You talked about her stories, about the way she remembered everyone's birthday even when they forgot hers." The memory was bittersweet. Mrs. Henderson had been one of the few people in Thornpack who'd ever really seen Kira, who treated her like family instead of an obligation. "You made her matter," Damon said softly. "In death, you gave her the recognition she'd never received in life." And I remember thinking that anyone who could love that deeply, who could see value where others saw only burden, that was someone worth knowing. "You couldn't have known I was your mate then," Kira said. "The bond doesn't work from a distance." "No," Damon agreed, "but my wolf knew you were important, and my heart—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My heart knew you were someone I could love, if given the chance." The confession hung between them like a bridge, offering her a choice about whether to cross over into something deeper and more permanent than the week-long trial they'd agreed to. "Damon," she started, but he held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to pressure you or push for decisions you're not ready to make. I just wanted you to know that this isn't casual for me. Whatever you decide at the end of the week, I need you to understand that my feelings are real." Kira looked at him, really looked, taking in the vulnerability in his golden eyes, the careful way he held himself as if preparing for rejection, the quiet strength that radiated from him even in this moment of emotional exposure. This man who'd rescued her from her darkest moment, who'd offered her sanctuary without asking for anything in return, who saw her not as a project to be improved, but as a person to be cherished. "It's not casual for me either," she said quietly. The relief that flooded his expression was almost overwhelming. "Kira, I'm scared," she continued, needing to say it all before she lost her nerve. "I'm terrified that this is too good to be true, that I'm going to wake up and discover it was all a rebound fantasy. But I'm also terrified of walking away from something that feels more right than anything I've ever known." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't think I need the full week," Kira said, her heart pounding. "I'm saying that somewhere between watching you respect my choices and seeing how your pack treats me like family, I started falling in love with you. And I'm saying that if you'll have me, I'd like to stay." Damon was very still for a moment, as if afraid that moving might break the spell. Then he reached for her hands, his touch gentle but sure. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Because once we bond, there's no going back. No matter what Marcus or anyone else might offer, you'll be mine and I'll be yours, completely." "I'm certain," Kira said, surprised by how absolutely true it felt. "I'm certain that I want to build a life with someone who sees my strength instead of my flaws. I'm certain that I want to belong to a community that values what I have to offer. And I'm certain that I want to wake up every morning next to someone who loves me for exactly who I am." "And the feud? The complications this will cause between our packs?" Kira considered the question seriously. There would be consequences, challenges they'd have to face together. But when she weighed those difficulties against the possibility of the life they could build together, the choice was clear. "Let them be complicated," she said firmly. "I'm tired of making myself smaller to accommodate other people's comfort. If they can't accept my choice, that's their problem, not ours." Damon's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love your courage and your compassion and your beautiful, stubborn independence. I love the way you fight for what matters and the way you refuse to apologize for taking up space." "I love you too," Kira replied, feeling the truth of it in every cell of her body. "I love the way you see me, really see me. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me feel like I'm worth choosing." When he kissed her, it was like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at the same time. The mate bond snapped into place between them with an almost audible click, filling the hollow space in her chest that she'd carried for so long. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it, not just someone to love, but someone to love her back without conditions or reservations. "When?" Damon asked when they finally broke apart. "When what? When do you want to have the mating ceremony?" His eyes were bright with joy and anticipation. "I know you just went through the trauma of one ceremony falling apart, but—" "As soon as possible," Kira interrupted, laughing at his surprised expression. "Damon, that wasn't my ceremony. That was Marcus's ceremony that I happened to be invited to. This will be ours, and I can't wait to make it official." "The next full moon is in 3 days," Damon said, his voice rough with emotion. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," Kira said firmly. "I'm done waiting for my life to begin. I'm done being careful and practical and settling for less than I deserve. I want to marry you under the moon and stars, surrounded by people who actually care about my happiness." "Then that's what we'll do," Damon promised, sealing the vow with another kiss that made her toes curl. As they walked back toward the pack house hand in hand, Kira felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not because it was safe or expected or practical, but because it was real. Because she was free to be herself, completely, scars and strength and stubborn independence included. Behind them, the stream continued its ancient song, carrying away the last remnants of her old life and clearing the path for whatever came next. And for the first time since her parents died, Kira was genuinely excited to find out what that might be. The morning of the full moon dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Kira woke in her guest room for what would be the last time, her heart racing with anticipation rather than anxiety. Tonight, she would bind herself to Damon in front of both packs, a ceremony designed not just to unite two people, but to begin healing the rift that had divided their communities for too long. The news of their impending mating had spread quickly through both territories, causing reactions that ranged from celebration to outrage to confused acceptance. Elder Morrison had arrived the day before, with a small delegation from Thornpack, their presence more diplomatic than hostile. Even Marcus had come, though he kept his distance and spoke to no one. "How are you feeling?" Vera asked as she helped Kira prepare for the ceremony. Instead of the elaborate white gown she'd worn for Marcus, Kira had chosen a simple dress in deep forest green that complemented her eyes and moved like water when she walked. "Perfect," Kira said, and meant it. Nervous, but perfect. "That's how you should feel on your mating day," Vera said with a smile. "Nervous means it matters." Through the window, Kira could see pack members from both territories working together to prepare the ceremonial clearing. The cooperation wasn't perfect. There were still suspicious glances and careful distances, but it was a start. Some bridges took time to build. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Kira, it's Elder Morrison. May I speak with you?" "Of course." Kira opened the door to find the elderly wolf looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "I wanted to apologize," he said without preamble, "for the other day and for not seeing what was right in front of me for years." "Elder Morrison, please let me finish," he said gently. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how we failed to protect you when Marcus rejected you so publicly." "You were right. We should have stood up for you. I should have stood up for you." "Why didn't you?" Kira asked, not out of anger, but genuine curiosity. "Because I was thinking like a politician instead of a pack leader," Morrison admitted. "I was so focused on maintaining alliances and avoiding conflict that I forgot our most important duty, protecting our own." He looked directly at her. "You deserved better from us, Kira. You deserved better from me." The apology meant more than she'd expected. "Thank you for saying that. I also wanted you to know that while some in our pack are struggling with your choice, many of us are happy for you. You're glowing in a way I've never seen before. Love suits you." "It does," Kira agreed, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Damon Blackthorn is a good man," Morrison continued. "His father and I had our differences, but Damon, he's nothing like the old Alpha. He leads with wisdom instead of pride. You've chosen well." "Thank you," Kira said, touched by his blessing. "That means a lot coming from you." After he left, Kira finished her preparations in peaceful solitude. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, she made her way to the ceremonial clearing where both packs had gathered under the rising moon. The sight that greeted her took her breath away. The clearing had been transformed with hundreds of candles and garlands of autumn flowers, creating an atmosphere of magic and celebration. Pack members from both territories stood together, their earlier tensions set aside for this moment of union and hope. And there, waiting for her at the center of it all, was Damon. He wore simple black clothing that emphasized his natural grace and strength, his dark hair catching the moonlight like obsidian. But it was his expression that made her heart skip. Pure joy and love and anticipation, as if she were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. As she walked toward him down the flower-strewn path, Kira felt the weight of her old life falling away with each step. The woman who'd been rejected and humiliated just days ago no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim what she deserved. "You look beautiful," Damon whispered as she took her place beside him, his voice rough with emotion. "So do you," she replied, meaning it completely. Elder Morrison stepped forward to officiate, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered packs. "We are here tonight to witness the mating of Damon Blackthorne and Kira Thorne, and to celebrate not just their union, but the beginning of a new chapter for both our communities." The ceremony that followed was everything Kira had dreamed of and nothing like the pageant Marcus had planned. Instead of empty ritual and political theater, every word felt meaningful and personal. When they exchanged vows, they spoke from the heart about the love they'd found and the life they wanted to build together. "I promise to see you clearly," Damon said, "to celebrate your strength and support you in your struggles. I promise to be your partner in all things, your equal in this bond we're creating." "I promise to trust you with my whole heart," Kira replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "To build a life with you that honors both our individual dreams and our shared vision. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." When Elder Morrison pronounced them mated and invited them to seal their bond, Damon's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. The mate bond that snapped fully into place between them felt like the sun rising after the longest night, warm and bright and absolutely right. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with pack members from both territories sharing food and stories and tentative hopes for a more peaceful future. Kira danced with her new mate, accepted congratulations from friends old and new, and marveled at how different this felt from the ceremony that had gone so wrong just days before. "Any regrets?" Damon asked as they finally escaped to the quiet of their new shared quarters, the pack house settling into peaceful silence around them. "Only one," Kira said, curling into his arms with a contented sigh. "What's that?" "That it took me so long to realize what I actually wanted," she replied. "I wasted so much time trying to fit into a life that was never meant for me." "Not wasted," Damon corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Everything that happened before led you here, to this moment, to us. I can't regret the path that brought you to me." "Even the painful parts?" "Especially the painful parts," Damon said firmly. "They made you who you are, strong and compassionate and brave enough to take risks for love. I wouldn't change a single thing about your story because it's what made you perfect for mine." As they settled into sleep in each other's arms, Kira felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There was still work to be done in bridging the gap between their packs, still dreams to pursue and obstacles to overcome. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, with someone who loved her completely and without reservation. Outside their window, the moon set over the forest that was now truly her home, and Kira drifted off to sleep knowing that her real life was just beginning. Epilogue. 6 months later. The children's laughter echoed through the trees as Kira watched them play in the meadow behind the newly completed sanctuary building. 3 young wolves, all orphans from various packs, chased each other in circles while their older human companions supervised from nearby benches. "The Morrison Foundation grant came through," Damon said, approaching with a stack of papers and a smile that made her heart skip. "Full funding for the next 3 years, plus commitments from 5 other packs to send children who need safe spaces to heal." "Really?" Kira felt tears prick her eyes as she took the paperwork. 6 months ago, the Kira Thorne Memorial Sanctuary for Young Wolves had been nothing but a dream whispered in the darkness. Now it was a reality, complete with trained counselors, educational programs, and more applications than they could currently accommodate. The memorial part was Elder Morrison's idea, Damon explained. He said your parents would be proud to have their memory honored this way. Kira nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. The sanctuary bore her family name, but it was her new family, Damon, Shadowmere Pack, and even the allies they'd found in Thorn territory that had made it possible. "How was the pack meeting?" she asked, changing the subject before she started crying happy tears in front of the children. "Productive," Damon replied with satisfaction. "The Joint Patrol program is working better than anyone expected. We've had 0 territorial disputes in 3 months, and Marcus actually volunteered to lead the next Interpack training session." It had taken time, but Marcus had eventually come to understand that the best thing he could do for everyone involved was to support the new alliance rather than undermining it. His relationship with Elena had ended amicably, and he seemed genuinely happier focusing on his role as a leader rather than trying to play romantic politics. "Speaking of productive," Kira said, leaning into Damon's embrace, "Dr. Sheffield thinks Emma is ready to go home to her aunt next month. She's been here 4 months, and the progress has been remarkable." Emma was one of their first success stories, a 12-year-old whose parents had died in a car accident, leaving her traumatized and struggling to control her first shifts. The combination of therapy, pack support, and patient guidance had helped her rediscover her confidence and her place in the world. "That's wonderful," Damon said, pride evident in his voice. "This place is changing lives, Kira. You're changing lives." "We're changing lives," she corrected, turning in his arms to face him properly. "This doesn't work without everyone. You, the pack, the funding, the volunteers. It takes a community." "It takes vision," Damon countered, "and courage, and someone willing to fight for what matters even when it's difficult." He cupped her face gently. "It takes you." Before she could argue further, one of the children called out to them, "Alpha Kira, Alpha Damon, come play with us." The titles still felt strange, Alpha Kira, but she was growing into it. As Damon's mate and the sanctuary's director, she'd naturally assumed a leadership role that felt nothing like the ornamental position she would have held as Marcus's mate. This was active leadership, meaningful responsibility that utilized her strengths and passion. "What do you say?" Damon asked with a grin, ready to get thoroughly defeated by a pack of children in whatever game they've invented today. "Always," Kira replied, taking his hand as they walked toward the laughing group. Later that evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Kira reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who'd been left at the altar 6 months ago seemed like someone from another lifetime, smaller, more frightened, willing to accept less than she deserved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marcus hadn't rejected me that night?" she asked suddenly. "No," Damon said without hesitation. "Because I can't imagine a world where you didn't end up exactly where you belong." "Even if it meant we never met?" "Especially then," Damon replied, pulling her closer. "Because I believe some things are inevitable. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe the path would have been different, but you and I, we were always going to find each other. The universe isn't stupid enough to keep 2 people like us apart forever." Kira smiled, leaning into his warmth as the first stars appeared overhead. She'd learned a lot about herself in the past months, that she was stronger than she'd realized, braver than she'd been allowed to be, and worthy of the kind of love that celebrated rather than diminished her. But most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came not from following the expected path, but from having the courage to choose the unknown when it promised something better than settling for safe. "I love our life," she said simply. "So do I," Damon replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I love you, Kira Blackthorn, all of you, exactly as you are." As the moon rose over their territory, their home, their pack, their future, Kira silently thanked whatever forces had brought her to this moment. The girl who'd been rejected at the altar was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. And in Damon's arms, surrounded by the life they built together, she finally understood what it meant to be truly, completely home.